And I remember being taken in the fancy dress class by my mother. And I must have been quite young. I don't know what I was dressed up as, but anyway, I was sort of pulled in for the prizes. And Vera Lynn, who lived in Ditchley, lovely lady, was giving the prize.
You won't believe what Princess Catherine just did at the Duchess of Kent's funeral. In front of everyone, she made a move that had Queen Camilla storming out in absolute rage. The shocking kiss that has the entire royal family in chaos and palace insiders calling it the most scandalous moment in modern royal history. What you're about to see will blow your mind and change how you view the royals forever. Queen Camilla had withdrawn from attending the funeral at the very last minute, with Buckingham Palace citing acute sinusitis as the reason for her absence.
William and I are absolutely delighted to be with you here in Birmingham on World Mental Health Day for our Royal Foundation Youth Forum. Mental health is something we both care deeply about.
The official statement read that Her Majesty was recovering from this sinus infection and would be resting ahead of the upcoming state visit with President Trump. But here's where it gets interesting. And this is something that palace insiders have been whispering about ever since that day. Multiple sources within the royal households have revealed that Queen Camilla was far from resting peacefully in her chambers. Instead, she had positioned herself in her private sitting room at Windsor Castle, with the television coverage of the funeral playing on multiple screens. Staff members who were present that day describe a scene that was quite different from the official narrative of a queen quietly recovering from illness. According to these palace sources, Camilla appeared increasingly agitated as the funeral coverage continued. She had initially settled in to watch what she expected to be a routine, solemn royal funeral. After all, the Duchess of Kent, while beloved within the family, was not a working member of the royal family anymore, and had lived quite privately for many years. The expectation was that this would be a quiet, dignified service with minimal fanfare. But as the cameras began showing the arrivals at Westminster Cathedral, it became clear that this was no ordinary royal funeral. The historic nature of the event, being the first Catholic funeral for a member of the royal family in modern history, had drawn significant media attention and a substantial royal turnout. More importantly for our story today, it had given Princess Catherine a prominent platform in the absence of Queen Camilla. Palace staff who were attending to Queen Camilla that morning noticed her demeanor change as she watched the coverage. What had started as casual viewing while she recovered from her illness transformed into something much more intense. She began asking for different camera angles, requesting that staff switch between various news channels to get the best coverage of the proceedings. One particularly revealing detail that has emerged from palace sources involves Queen Camilla's reaction to seeing Princess Catherine's arrival at the cathedral. The Princess of Wales looked absolutely stunning in her elegant black Catherine Walker coat dress, accessorized with the 4-row Japanese pearl choker and silver jubilee pearl earrings that had belonged to the late Queen Elizabeth. This wasn't just a fashion choice. It was a statement piece that connected Catherine directly to the royal legacy. According to staff present at Windsor that day, Queen Camilla's interest in the funeral coverage intensified significantly when Princess Catherine appeared on screen. She reportedly leaned forward in her chair and made several comments about Catherine's prominent position in the funeral arrangements. Without her presence, Catherine had naturally stepped into the role of the senior female royal family member at the service, walking alongside Prince William and positioning herself close to King Charles throughout the proceedings. What palace insiders describe as particularly telling was Queen Camilla's growing focus on the relationship between King Charles and Princess Catherine. The cameras frequently showed the two of them together, and their obvious comfort with each other was clear for everyone to see. This wasn't surprising to those who follow the royal family closely, as Charles and Catherine have developed a remarkably close bond over the years, particularly strengthened by their shared experience of cancer diagnoses in recent times. But for Queen Camilla, watching from Windsor, this dynamic seemed to strike a nerve. Staff members report that she began making comments about protocol and proper positioning within the royal family hierarchy. She appeared frustrated that she wasn't there to maintain what she saw as the proper balance of relationships within the family structure. The funeral itself was proceeding beautifully, with Cardinal Vincent Nichols conducting the Requiem Mass with great dignity and reverence. The Duchess of Kent was being honored in exactly the way she would have wanted, with her Catholic faith taking center stage in this historic moment. But back at Windsor Castle, the atmosphere was becoming increasingly tense. Palace sources revealed that Queen Camilla requested regular updates from her private secretary about the proceedings, asking specific questions about who was standing where, who was speaking to whom, and how the media was covering various aspects of the funeral. This wasn't the behavior of someone simply keeping a casual eye on royal proceedings while recovering from illness. This was someone who felt she needed to monitor and manage a situation from which she was absent. As the funeral service reached its conclusion and the royal family began to gather on the steps of Westminster Cathedral, Queen Camilla's attention became laser-focused on the television screens. Staff members describe her as being completely absorbed in watching every movement, every interaction, every gesture among the royal family members present at the cathedral. What happened next would change everything. As the coffin was being moved to the hearse for its journey to Windsor, and as the royal family prepared to say their final goodbyes before departing, Princess Catherine approached King Charles for what would become one of the most talked about moments in recent royal history. Palace sources at Windsor report that Queen Camilla was watching intently as this moment unfolded, completely unaware that what she was about to witness would trigger a reaction that would reverberate through the royal household for days to come. The stage was set for a moment that would test the bonds of family, challenge royal protocol, and reveal just how complex the relationships within the House of Windsor really are. The moment that would send shockwaves through the royal household was building slowly as the funeral service reached its conclusion. According to multiple eyewitness accounts and palace sources, what unfolded on the steps of Westminster Cathedral was both deeply moving and utterly unprecedented in modern royal history. As the Requiem Mass concluded and the congregation began to file out of the cathedral, the royal family members gathered on the ancient stone steps to witness the final moments of the Duchess of Kent's funeral service. The atmosphere was solemn and respectful, with family members positioning themselves according to both protocol and personal relationships with the deceased Duchess. King Charles stood prominently among the gathering, his role as monarch making him the natural focal point of the assembled royals. At 76 years old, and having recently battled his own health challenges, the king appeared both dignified and somewhat vulnerable as he prepared to say goodbye to his cousin's wife. The weight of his royal duties was evident, but so was the personal nature of this loss for someone who had known the Duchess of Kent for decades. Princess Catherine, elegant in her black mourning attire, had maintained her composure throughout the entire service with the grace that has become her trademark. The 43-year-old future queen had chosen her outfit with careful consideration, wearing pieces that honored both the solemnity of the occasion and her connection to the royal family's heritage. Her presence at the funeral had been particularly meaningful, given her own recent health struggles and her understanding of the family's need for continuity during difficult times. As the pallbearers from the Royal Dragoon Guards began the careful process of transferring the Duchess of Kent's coffin to the waiting hearse, family members started positioning themselves for the final farewell. This is when the dynamics between the royal family members became most apparent to those watching, both in person and through the television cameras that were broadcasting the historic moment around the world. Palace sources who have spoken about that day describe a palpable sense of emotion among the family members. The Duchess of Kent had been a beloved figure within the royal circle, known for her warmth, her dedication to charitable causes, and her groundbreaking conversion to Catholicism. Her passing marked the end of an era, and the funeral service had been a fitting tribute to her life and legacy. But it was what happened next that would become the defining moment of the entire day. As King Charles prepared to make his departure from Westminster Cathedral, heading toward his waiting car for the journey back to Windsor, Princess Catherine approached him in a way that immediately caught the attention of everyone present. According to eyewitness accounts, Princess Catherine moved toward her father-in-law with obvious intention and purpose. This wasn't a casual interaction or a brief acknowledgement between family members. Instead, it was a deliberate approach that demonstrated the deep bond that had developed between the king and his daughter-in-law over the years. What happened next was captured by photographers and television cameras from multiple angles, creating a moment that would be analyzed and discussed for days afterward. Princess Catherine reached out to King Charles, placing her hand gently on his shoulder in a gesture that immediately conveyed intimacy and affection that went far beyond typical royal protocol. The physical contact itself was significant. Royal protocol generally maintains a certain level of formality in public settings, particularly during official events and ceremonies. While family members do show affection toward one another, the level of physical intimacy that Princess Catherine displayed toward King Charles was notably warm and personal, especially given the public nature of the setting. But the hand on the shoulder was just the beginning. In a move that stunned onlookers and would later be described by royal commentators as unprecedented, Princess Catherine leaned in and kissed King Charles on both cheeks. This wasn't a quick formal kiss that might be expected between family members at a public event. Instead, it was a lingering, affectionate gesture that spoke to a relationship that had clearly deepened beyond the typical bonds between a monarch and his son's wife. The kiss itself lasted several seconds, with Princess Catherine maintaining her gentle touch on King Charles's shoulder throughout the entire interaction. Photographers captured the king's reaction in real time, showing a man who appeared genuinely moved by the gesture. His expression conveyed both surprise and warmth, suggesting that even he hadn't expected such an open display of affection from his daughter-in-law. Following the kisses, Princess Catherine performed what royal watchers immediately recognized as a perfect curtsy. But even this traditional gesture was executed in a way that maintained the intimate nature of their interaction. Rather than stepping back to perform the curtsy at a respectful distance, as protocol would typically dictate, she remained close to King Charles, keeping her hands on his shoulders even as she dipped into the traditional genuflection. The entire sequence lasted perhaps 30 seconds, but those 30 seconds captured something that went far beyond a simple goodbye between family members. Royal experts who analyzed the footage later noted that the interaction displayed a level of comfort and affection that spoke to years of relationship building between Princess Catherine and King Charles. What made this moment even more significant was the context in which it occurred. This was a public funeral, being broadcast live around the world, with dozens of cameras capturing every moment. Princess Catherine would have been fully aware that her every move was being watched and recorded. Her decision to show such open affection toward King Charles wasn't an impulsive gesture made in a moment of grief. It was a calculated demonstration of their relationship. The timing was also crucial. With Queen Camilla absent from the funeral, Princess Catherine had naturally stepped into the role of primary female support for King Charles during this difficult day. Her positioning throughout the funeral service had placed her in close proximity to the king, and their interactions throughout the day had already demonstrated their comfort with each other. But this final moment, this intimate goodbye, elevated their relationship to a new level of public acknowledgement. Princess Catherine wasn't just saying goodbye to her father-in-law. She was making a statement about their bond, their mutual support, and her position within the royal family hierarchy. The reaction from other family members present was also telling. Prince William, standing nearby, appeared unsurprised by his wife's gesture, suggesting that this level of affection between his wife and father was not uncommon in private settings. Other royal family members looked on with what appeared to be approval and understanding, indicating that Princess Catherine's behavior was seen as appropriate and welcome within the family context. However, the real test of this moment's significance wouldn't be measured by the reactions of those present at Westminster Cathedral. Instead, it would be determined by the response of someone who was watching every second of this interaction unfold on television screens 25 miles away at Windsor Castle. The television screens at Windsor Castle had been displaying the funeral coverage for hours, but nothing could have prepared Queen Camilla for what she was about to witness. According to multiple palace sources who were present that afternoon, the Queen's demeanor had been steadily shifting throughout the day as she watched the proceedings from her private sitting room. but the moment Princess Catherine approached King Charles on the cathedral steps marked a dramatic turning point that no one in the royal household could have anticipated. Palace staff who were in attendance that day described Queen Camilla as having been relatively calm during the earlier portions of the funeral coverage. She had watched the arrivals, the service itself, and the initial moments of the departure with what appeared to be normal interest for someone monitoring an important family event from afar. Her illness had genuinely kept her from attending, and she seemed to be managing her recovery while staying informed about the proceedings. But as the cameras focused on the final moments outside Westminster Cathedral, with family members gathering for their last farewells, Queen Camilla's attention became noticeably more focused. Staff members report that she leaned forward in her chair, her posture becoming more rigid as she watched the interactions between the various royal family members who were present at the cathedral. The moment Princess Catherine began her approach toward King Charles, palace sources indicate that Queen Camilla's entire body language changed. What had been casual viewing transformed into intense scrutiny, with the Queen appearing to study every movement, every gesture, every nuance of what was unfolding on her television screens. Staff members present in the room noticed her hands gripping the arms of her chair more tightly as Princess Catherine moved closer to the king. When Princess Catherine placed her hand on King Charles's shoulder, the reaction from Queen Camilla was immediate and unmistakable. According to eyewitness accounts from palace staff, the Queen audibly gasped, her hand moving to her chest in a gesture of shock and disbelief. The intimate nature of the gesture had clearly caught her completely off guard, and her surprise quickly began transforming into something much more intense. But it was when Princess Catherine leaned in for the kiss that Queen Camilla's composure completely shattered. Palace sources describe a reaction that was both immediate and explosive, with the Queen rising partially from her chair as she watched the kiss unfold on screen. Staff members report hearing her make several sharp exclamations, though the exact words have remained confidential out of respect for the royal household's privacy. The duration of the kiss seemed to amplify Queen Camilla's distress. As Princess Catherine lingered in her affectionate goodbye, maintaining contact with King Charles throughout the extended interaction, Queen Camilla's reaction intensified correspondingly. Palace staff describe her as becoming visibly agitated, her breathing becoming more rapid, and her movements increasingly restless as she watched the scene continue to unfold. According to these same sources, Queen Camilla began speaking to the television screen itself, addressing Princess Catherine directly, despite the obvious futility of such an action. While the specific content of these remarks has not been disclosed by palace staff, their tone was described as ranging from shocked disbelief to increasing frustration and anger as the full implications of what she was witnessing began to sink in. The curtsy that followed the kiss appeared to be the final straw for Queen Camilla's emotional state. Rather than seeing it as the traditional gesture of respect that it represented, palace sources suggest that she interpreted the entire sequence as an inappropriate display that crossed several lines of royal protocol and personal boundaries. Her reaction to this final element of Princess Catherine's goodbye was reportedly the most intense of the entire viewing experience. Staff members who were present described Queen Camilla as beginning to pace around her sitting room at this point, unable to remain seated as she processed what she had just witnessed. The television coverage continued, showing the aftermath of the interaction, with King Charles's obvious pleasure at Princess Catherine's affectionate gesture, and this appeared to further intensify Queen Camilla's emotional response to the situation. Palace sources indicate that Queen Camilla began making repeated references to her 24 years of marriage to King Charles, expressing frustration that such an intimate public display of affection had been directed towards someone other than herself. The comparison between her own more formal public interactions with the king and the warmth that Princess Catherine had just displayed seemed to strike a particularly sensitive nerve. The fact that this interaction was taking place in such a public forum, with cameras capturing every moment for broadcast around the world, appeared to amplify Queen Camilla's distress significantly. Palace staff report that she made several comments about the appropriateness of such behavior at a funeral, questioning whether Princess Catherine fully understood the gravity and solemnity that should have characterized such an occasion. But beyond the protocol concerns, palace sources suggest that Queen Camilla's reaction was driven by deeper emotional currents related to her position within the royal family hierarchy and her relationship with King Charles. The obvious comfort and intimacy between the king and Princess Catherine, displayed so publicly and without any apparent self-consciousness, seemed to highlight aspects of royal family dynamics that Queen Camilla found deeply troubling. Staff members describe Queen Camilla as becoming increasingly fixated on analyzing every aspect of the interaction she had just witnessed. She reportedly requested that the footage be replayed multiple times, studying Princess Catherine's approach, the duration of the physical contact, King Charles's response, and the reactions of other family members who were present during the exchange. This repeated viewing seemed to intensify rather than calm Queen Camilla's emotional response. Palace sources indicate that with each replay, she noticed additional details that further fueled her frustration and concern about what had transpired. The king's obvious enjoyment of Princess Catherine's affection, the natural ease with which the interaction had unfolded, and the apparent approval of other family members all contributed to her growing sense of unease about the situation. Perhaps most significantly, palace staff report that Queen Camilla began expressing concerns about how this moment would be perceived by the public and the media. She appeared acutely aware that the interaction would be analyzed extensively by royal commentators and could potentially shift public perception about the relationships within the royal family. The implications of such a public display of intimacy between King Charles and Princess Catherine clearly weighed heavily on her mind. As the television coverage moved on to other aspects of the funeral's conclusion, Queen Camilla's focus remained entirely concentrated on processing what she had witnessed. Palace sources describe her as being in a state of heightened emotional intensity that persisted long after the specific moment had passed, suggesting that the impact of Princess Catherine's goodbye kiss would continue to reverberate through her thoughts and concerns for the remainder of that day and beyond. The immediate aftermath of witnessing Princess Catherine's intimate goodbye with King Charles sent Queen Camilla into what palace sources describe as a state of frantic activity that was completely at odds with her supposed recovery from acute sinusitis. Rather than resting quietly as her official schedule suggested, the Queen embarked on what can only be characterized as an emergency damage control operation from her private quarters at Windsor Castle. According to staff members who were present during these crucial hours, Queen Camilla's first instinct was to reach for her private telephone and begin making a series of urgent calls to key figures within the royal household. Palace sources indicate that her initial call was to her private secretary, whom she summoned to her sitting room with immediate effect, despite the late afternoon timing and the fact that it was technically outside of normal working hours. The conversation between Queen Camilla and her private secretary has been described by those with knowledge of the situation as intense and wide-ranging, covering everything from media management strategies to protocol concerns and potential responses to what had just unfolded at Westminster Cathedral. Palace sources suggest that Queen Camilla was particularly focused on understanding how the moment between Princess Catherine and King Charles was being covered by various news outlets and social media platforms. Within minutes of this initial conversation, Queen Camilla had instructed her staff to begin monitoring media coverage across all platforms, with particular attention paid to how the kiss and curtsy sequence was being interpreted by royal commentators and the general public. This wasn't the behavior of someone who was merely concerned about a minor breach of protocol. This was someone who recognized that a significant moment had occurred and was determined to manage its implications. Palace insiders reveal that Queen Camilla's concerns extended far beyond the immediate media coverage. She appeared to be acutely aware that the interaction between Princess Catherine and King Charles represented something deeper and more significant than a simple family goodbye. The intimacy and naturalness of their exchange had revealed a bond that could potentially reshape public perception of relationships within the royal family, and Queen Camilla seemed determined to prevent that from happening. The Queen's next series of phone calls were directed towards senior members of the royal communications team, according to sources within the household. These conversations were described as urgent consultations about potential strategies for contextualizing the events of the afternoon, within a broader narrative about family relationships and appropriate royal behavior during times of grief and mourning. What became clear during these discussions, according to palace sources, was that Queen Camilla felt a deep sense of urgency about addressing what she perceived as a challenge to established royal hierarchy and protocol. Her absence from the funeral had created a vacuum that Princess Catherine had filled naturally and effectively. But Queen Camilla appeared to view this development as potentially problematic for the long-term stability of relationships within the royal household. Staff members who were involved in these emergency consultations described Queen Camilla as being particularly focused on the upcoming state visit with President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump, which was scheduled to begin the following day. This major diplomatic event represented an opportunity for Queen Camilla to reassert her position and demonstrate her central role within the royal family's official functions. Palace sources indicate that Queen Camilla began treating the Trump state visit as a critical platform for what she saw as necessary course correction following the events at Westminster Cathedral. Rather than viewing the diplomatic engagement as a separate event, she appeared to see it as directly connected to the afternoon's developments and as an opportunity to re-establish proper protocol and hierarchy within royal family dynamics. The planning discussions that took place during those crucial hours reportedly covered every aspect of the state visit, from positioning and protocol to media opportunities and public interactions. Queen Camilla appeared determined to ensure that her role as queen consort would be prominently featured, and that the natural hierarchy of the royal family would be clearly demonstrated for both the American guests and the watching public. According to palace insiders, Queen Camilla's approach to these preparations was notably more detailed and intensive than would typically be expected for a state visit. Every element of the event was scrutinized and planned with what staff described as unusual precision, suggesting that she viewed the occasion as carrying significance far beyond its diplomatic importance. The Queen's communications with senior palace officials during this period reportedly included extensive discussions about media management and public messaging surrounding both the funeral events and the upcoming state visit. Palace sources suggest that she was particularly concerned about ensuring that coverage of the Trump visit would overshadow any lingering discussion about the afternoon's events at Westminster Cathedral. But perhaps most significantly, palace staff report that Queen Camilla began developing what can only be described as a comprehensive strategy for managing her interactions with Princess Catherine during the state visit. Rather than allowing these interactions to unfold naturally, as would typically be the case during family gatherings, Queen Camilla appeared determined to carefully orchestrate every moment to demonstrate proper protocol and hierarchy. This strategic approach extended to seemingly minor details about positioning, speaking opportunities, and even the physical arrangement of royal family members during various elements of the state visit. Palace sources indicate that Queen Camilla requested detailed briefings about every aspect of the planned events, with particular attention paid to moments when she and Princess Catherine would appear together in public. The intensity of Queen Camilla's planning efforts during those crucial hours following the funeral was described by staff as being driven by what appeared to be a deep conviction that immediate action was necessary to prevent any lasting damage to established royal family dynamics. Her approach suggested that she viewed the events at Westminster Cathedral not as an isolated incident, but as part of a larger pattern that required decisive intervention. Palace insiders also report that Queen Camilla's conversations during this period included references to historical precedents and established protocols for managing similar situations within royal family contexts. She appeared to be drawing on her extensive experience within the royal household to develop strategies that would effectively address what she perceived as challenges to proper royal behavior and hierarchy. As the evening progressed and preparations for the Trump state visit intensified, Queen Camilla's focus appeared to shift from reactive damage control to proactive strategic planning. Palace sources suggest that by the end of that crucial afternoon and evening, she had developed a comprehensive approach for the following day's events that would serve multiple purposes simultaneously, addressing both diplomatic obligations and internal family dynamics. The stage was now set for what palace insiders anticipated would be a carefully orchestrated demonstration of royal protocol and hierarchy, designed to re-establish the proper balance of relationships within the royal family, while fulfilling the important diplomatic obligations associated with hosting the American President and First Lady. The morning of September 17th dawned with what palace sources describe as an atmosphere of carefully controlled tension at Windsor Castle. Queen Camilla had spent much of the previous evening finalizing her strategic approach to the Trump state visit, and now the moment had arrived to put her plans into action. According to staff members who were present during the preparations, the Queen's demeanor was notably different from her usual calm composure before major royal events. Palace insiders reveal that Queen Camilla's morning routine was executed with military precision, with every detail of her appearance and positioning carefully planned to reinforce her role as queen consort. Her choice of outfit, her jewelry selection, and even her hairstyle were all selected with the specific intention of projecting authority and establishing clear hierarchical distinctions within the royal family gathering that would welcome the American visitors. The significance of Queen Camilla's approach became evident from the earliest moments of the state visit preparations. Rather than allowing the natural family dynamics to unfold, as they typically would during such events, palace sources indicate that she had requested specific briefings about the exact positioning and protocol for every aspect of the day's activities. This level of detailed planning was unusual even by royal standards, and suggested that she viewed the occasion as requiring exceptional management. Staff members who were involved in these morning preparations describe Queen Camilla as being particularly focused on ensuring that every interaction during the state visit would demonstrate proper royal protocol. Her instructions to household staff were described as being more detailed than usual, covering everything from the timing of arrivals to the specific positioning of family members during various ceremonial elements of the day's program. The Queen's attention to detail extended to aspects of the visit that might normally be handled by protocol officers without direct royal involvement. Palace sources indicate that she personally reviewed the arrangements for media positioning, ensuring that photographs and television coverage would capture the royal family in configurations that clearly demonstrated established hierarchies and relationships. When President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump's helicopter landed on the grounds of Windsor Castle, the carefully orchestrated nature of Queen Camilla's strategy became immediately apparent to those observing the proceedings. According to eyewitness accounts, the Queen had positioned herself with deliberate precision, ensuring that her role as the senior female member of the royal family would be unmistakably clear to both the visiting dignitaries and the assembled media. The arrival sequence itself had been planned with what palace sources describe as exceptional attention to timing and positioning. Rather than the more relaxed approach that might typically characterize such welcomes, every movement appeared to have been choreographed to ensure that proper protocol would be maintained throughout the entire process of receiving the American visitors. The initial moments of the American visitors' arrival provided Queen Camilla with her first opportunity to demonstrate what palace sources describe as her refined approach to managing royal family dynamics. As Prince William and Princess Catherine moved forward to provide the initial welcome to President and Mrs. Trump, Queen Camilla's positioning and timing appeared to be carefully calculated to maintain proper protocol, while subtly reinforcing established hierarchies. Palace insiders who observed these early moments of the state visit describe Queen Camilla's behavior as being notably more formal and structured than would typically be expected during family gatherings of this nature. Her interactions with other royal family members carried an air of official authority that seemed designed to establish clear boundaries and expectations for the day's proceedings. But it was during the transition from the initial helicopter landing site to the formal welcome area, where King Charles and Queen Camilla were waiting, that the most significant moment occurred. palace sources and media observers who were present described a brief but telling interaction that would become emblematic of the careful management Queen Camilla had planned for the entire day. As the group approached the formal welcome area, with Prince William and Princess Catherine escorting the American visitors toward King Charles and Queen Camilla, a moment of apparent confusion arose regarding the proper positioning for the formal introductions. It was at this point that Queen Camilla executed what palace insiders describe as a masterful demonstration of protocol management. According to multiple eyewitness accounts, Queen Camilla stepped forward and gently but firmly guided Princess Catherine to the appropriate position within the receiving line. This gesture, which was captured by numerous photographers and television cameras, appeared on the surface to be a simple matter of ensuring proper protocol. However, palace sources suggest that the timing and execution of this guidance carried deeper significance related to the events of the previous day. The physical nature of Queen Camilla's intervention was described by those present as being both subtle and unmistakable. Rather than using verbal direction, which might have appeared awkward or obvious to the watching media, she employed a gentle but decisive physical gesture that immediately communicated the proper positioning, while simultaneously demonstrating her authority in managing such situations. Palace staff who witnessed this moment describe it as being executed with perfect timing and diplomacy. Queen Camilla's approach managed to correct what she apparently perceived as improper positioning, while avoiding any appearance of conflict or embarrassment for Princess Catherine. The smoothness of the execution suggested careful preparation and considerable experience in managing such delicate interpersonal dynamics. Princess Catherine's response to Queen Camilla's guidance was, according to palace sources, entirely appropriate and professional. She immediately moved to the indicated position without any apparent resistance or confusion, suggesting that she understood both the protocol requirements and the broader implications of the moment. This smooth execution of the repositioning allowed the formal welcome to proceed without any apparent disruption or awkwardness. However, media observers and royal commentators who analyzed the footage later noted that the interaction carried layers of meaning that extended far beyond simple protocol management. The timing of Queen Camilla's intervention, occurring just one day after the intimate moment between Princess Catherine and King Charles at the funeral, created what many interpreted as a subtle but clear statement about hierarchy and appropriate behavior within royal family contexts. The remainder of the state visit proceedings continued with what palace sources describe as flawless execution of Queen Camilla's strategic approach. Throughout the various elements of the diplomatic program, from the formal lunch to the ceremonial activities, the Queen maintained a prominent and authoritative presence that left no doubt about her position within the royal family structure. Palace insiders report that Queen Camilla's interactions with Princess Catherine throughout the day maintained a tone of professional courtesy, while subtly reinforcing the established hierarchy. Rather than the warm familiarity that might typically characterize their public interactions, observers noted a more formal distance that seemed designed to clarify roles and relationships within the family structure. The diplomatic elements of the state visit proceeded with remarkable smoothness, suggesting that Queen Camilla's strategic approach had successfully managed to address her concerns about royal family dynamics without compromising the important international relationships that such visits are designed to strengthen and maintain. The success of Queen Camilla's approach was perhaps most evident in the media coverage that emerged from the state visit. Rather than continued discussion about the previous day's funeral events, the focus shifted entirely to the diplomatic success of the Trump visit and the professional execution of the royal family's hosting duties. This redirection of attention appeared to align perfectly with Queen Camilla's strategic objectives. Staff members who were present throughout both days of these events described the overall outcome as representing a masterful example of crisis management and strategic communication. Queen Camilla had successfully navigated what could have been a challenging situation while maintaining the dignity and protocol standards that are essential to royal family functioning. The long-term implications of Queen Camilla's response to the funeral events became clearer in the weeks that followed the state visit. Palace sources indicate that the approach she developed during those crucial hours after witnessing Princess Catherine's goodbye kiss established precedents and protocols that would influence royal family dynamics for future events and public appearances. Perhaps most significantly, the entire sequence of events from the funeral through the state visit demonstrated Queen Camilla's sophisticated understanding of royal family dynamics and her ability to manage complex interpersonal situations while fulfilling her official duties. Her response showed both emotional intelligence and strategic thinking that effectively addressed multiple challenges simultaneously. The resolution of this particular situation also highlighted the resilience and adaptability of royal family structures when faced with unexpected developments. Queen Camilla's measured response ensured that both personal relationships and public perceptions remained stable, while allowing all family members to maintain their dignity and continue fulfilling their respective roles within the monarchy. As palace sources reflect on these events, they represent them as an example of how the modern royal family navigates the complex intersection of personal relationships, public expectations, and institutional requirements in an era of unprecedented media scrutiny and public interest in royal family dynamics and relationships.